She was just a child playing outside on a quiet afternoon. No danger, no crime, just laughter in the air, until a single phone call changed everything. A neighbor's suspicion turned into flashing lights, heavy footsteps, and questions no child should ever face. But what the neighbor didn't know was who was about to walk onto that scene. This moment would flip fear into shock and expose a truth far bigger than one child, one call, or one street. What happened when her mother arrived? The call went through in seconds. On the other end of the line, a calm dispatcher's voice asked the routine question, "911, what's your emergency?" The neighbor's words spilled out quickly, carefully chosen, edged with fear that sounded real enough. "There's a girl outside. She's riding on the sidewalk. She looks suspicious. I don't know what she's doing here. Can you send someone?" The report was vague, yet charged with undertones that carried more weight than the words themselves. A child with chalk was turned into a suspicious individual. Laughter became disturbance. The neighbor's discomfort became danger. And just like that, the machinery of authority began to move. Meanwhile, Maya kept sketching, blissfully unaware of the storm her presence had stirred. She had almost finished her sun drawing, adding little swirls of pink and purple around its rays. To her, it was beautiful. To Angela, glancing out the window every few minutes, it was a sweet reminder of why she worked so hard, to protect this innocence. But Angela had also learned to trust her instincts, and something felt off. She noticed the way the neighbor across the street lingered, phone pressed tightly to their ear. She saw the tense body language and the sideways glances. Years of working in law enforcement had sharpened her sense for trouble, and right now, it whispered to her that something wasn't right. She stepped onto the porch, calling out gently, "Maya, 5 more minutes, okay?" Maya nodded without looking up, too focused on shading her drawing. Angela folded her arms, scanning the street, her unease growing heavier. A faint sound in the distance caught her attention. The low hum of a car engine, steady, deliberate. It was too early to know, but Angela's chest tightened. She had seen this pattern before, too many times. A harmless scene twisted into a threat by someone else's fear. She didn't want to believe it was happening here, not in her own neighborhood, not to her child. But the feeling wouldn't go away. Inside, the neighbor ended the call and slipped back into the shadows of their porch. To them, they had done their part, reported what they saw. Now it was someone else's problem. But on that quiet street, beneath the clear sky, the wheels of something much larger had already been set in motion. The street was quiet, but the silence didn't last long. It was broken by the distant wail of a siren, low at first, then growing sharper as it neared. Angela's heart sank. She knew that sound too well, and she knew it wasn't a coincidence. She turned her gaze toward the corner of the block just as 2 patrol cars rolled into view, lights flashing against the neat row of houses. Maya froze in her spot on the sidewalk, chalk still in hand. She stared at the swirling red and blue lights that reflected in her wide eyes. For a moment she thought maybe it was something else. Maybe there was trouble somewhere else on the street. But when both cars slowed in front of her house, her stomach dropped. Angela stepped forward, moving instinctively between her daughter and the approaching vehicles. She didn't panic, not outwardly, but every muscle in her body tensed. She had been in situations like this before, but never here, never with her child at the center of it. Car doors opened. 2 officers stepped out, their boots heavy on the pavement. The radios on their shoulders crackled softly as they exchanged brief words neither Maya nor Angela could hear. Then, without hesitation, their eyes locked on Maya. Neighbors began to stir. Curtains shifted, blinds tilted, doors creaked open. The quiet street became a stage, and Maya, still clutching her chalk, stood frozen in the spotlight. "Ma'am, step aside," one of the officers said, his tone clipped, rehearsed. He wasn't asking. He was giving an order. Angela raised her chin slightly, her voice calm but firm. "She's my daughter." She was drawing on the sidewalk. "That's it." The officer didn't break stride. His partner's hand rested on the strap of his vest, eyes narrowing on Maya as though she were already guilty of something unsaid. Maya's heartbeat thundered in her chest. She had never been this close to the flashing lights, never felt the weight of so many eyes staring at her. She looked up at her mother, searching for reassurance. Angela gave a slight nod, but inside her thoughts were racing. She recognized the look in the officer's eyes, the look of men arriving with a story already in their heads. Someone had painted her daughter as a threat, and now these officers were filling in the details without asking a single question. The street seemed smaller now, tighter, as the officers drew closer. Angela could feel the air shift. This wasn't just a misunderstanding to be cleared up with a few words. This was something heavier, something she knew could spiral if she didn't tread carefully. The taller officer stopped just a few feet away, scanning the chalk drawings on the ground. His lips tightened, but his voice stayed cold. "We got a call. Reports of suspicious behavior. Matches the description." Angela's pulse quickened. She wanted to shout, to demand who had called, to demand why. But years of training kept her measured. "She's a child." "Look at her. Does she look suspicious to you?" The officer didn't answer. His silence was louder than any words. Behind them, the other officer spoke into his radio, relaying a report of a possible disturbance under investigation. Angela's gut twisted. She had seen too many moments like this escalate in the blink of an eye. She stepped closer to Maya, shielding her with her body, but her mind was already racing with what might come next. The neighbor who had called peeked out from their porch, satisfied, their face half hidden in shadow. Maya's chalk dropped from her trembling fingers, rolling across the pavement until it stopped near the officer's boot. The moment stretched thin, taut like a wire ready to snap, and then, "Step back, ma'am. We'll handle this." The words sliced through the air, pulling the scene into a dangerous new direction. Angela's jaw tightened. She had heard those words before. "We'll handle this." They always carried the same meaning. Step aside. Stop talking. Let authority take over. But this wasn't a stranger on the street. This was her daughter. She took one steady breath, standing tall. "Handle what?" she asked, her voice low but edged with steel. "She's a child. She's been drawing with chalk. That's all." The taller officer's expression didn't shift. His partner, however, moved forward, his hand still hovering near his utility belt. His eyes flicked from Maya to Angela, weighing the situation as if deciding how much of a threat they were. Maya shrank behind her mother, clutching her shirt. Her drawings, bright suns and flowers scattered across the pavement, suddenly felt like evidence instead of art. She looked at the officers, then at her mother, trying to understand what she had done wrong. Angela felt the weight of her daughter's gaze. She bent slightly, whispering, "Stay calm, baby. Don't move." Then, standing straight again, she fixed her eyes on the officers. "Ma'am," the shorter officer said, his voice sharp, "we got a call about suspicious activity. We're required to investigate. Now, step aside so we can talk to her." "No," Angela replied immediately. "You will talk to me. She's 12. She doesn't need to explain anything to you." Her refusal hung in the air. A couple of neighbors had stepped out of their houses now, arms folded, curious eyes following every word. Some looked concerned. Others looked entertained, as if this were just another bit of drama unfolding on a Saturday afternoon. The taller officer took a step closer, his shadow falling across the chalk drawings. "Ma'am, you're obstructing. If you don't step aside, we'll have to escalate this." Angela's pulse quickened. She knew the language. They were building a case for control. She also knew how quickly that word, escalate, could turn a simple encounter into something irreversible. She raised her voice, not in anger but in clarity, so that the watching neighbors could hear. "My daughter has done nothing wrong. She was drawing pictures on the sidewalk. That is not suspicious behavior." Maya tugged at her mother's shirt again, whispering, "Mom, why are they mad?" Her small voice broke Angela's heart. She wanted to scoop her up and run inside, away from the flashing lights and prying eyes. But she couldn't, because she knew running would only make things worse. The shorter officer crouched slightly, trying to look at Maya from behind Angela. His tone softened, but it was hollow. "Hey there, sweetheart. What's your name? What are you doing out here?" Maya froze, her lips parting, but no sound coming out. She had never been spoken to like this, never been made to feel so small. Her mother's hand gently pressed against her back, steadying her. Angela's voice cut in, sharp as glass. You do not speak to her. You speak to me. I am her mother. The crouching officer stood abruptly, annoyance flashing across his face. Ma'am, you're making this harder than it needs to be. Angela's chest tightened. She could feel the crowd around them growing, eyes staring, whispers carrying. She knew exactly what they were seeing. Not a child drawing with chalk, not a mother protecting her daughter. They were seeing what the caller wanted them to see, a problem, a disturbance. The taller officer shifted his stance, one hand resting against his vest, the other dangling dangerously close to his holster. His gaze was fixed, unblinking. Last chance, ma'am. Step aside. Angela didn't move. She couldn't. Every fiber of her being screamed to protect her daughter, even as the danger pressed in from all sides. And then, in that tense silence, Maya's voice broke through, trembling but clear. Mom, did I do something bad? The question pierced the air, heavier than the flashing lights, heavier than the officer's words. It was the voice of a child, innocent, confused, and already carrying the weight of someone else's fear. Angela turned slightly, enough to meet her daughter's eyes. No, baby, she whispered, steady but firm. You didn't do anything wrong. But even as she said the words, the sound of another car approaching echoed down the street, another patrol unit pulling closer. The situation wasn't de-escalating. It was growing. The second patrol car pulled to the curb, its headlights slicing through the late afternoon haze. Another set of flashing lights washed across the street, doubling the intensity. Two more officers stepped out, their radios crackling as they surveyed the scene. The crowd of neighbors grew larger, people shifting from behind curtains to front porches, their whispers weaving into the air like a running commentary. Angela's stomach knotted. 4 officers now, 4 against one child and her mother. She felt the imbalance in her bones. This wasn't protection, it was intimidation. One of the new arrivals approached the first pair, speaking in hushed tones. Their eyes flicked repeatedly toward Maya, then to Angela, as though they were pieces on a chessboard to be moved, controlled, and contained. Angela recognized the exchange. She had seen officers confer like this before, deciding on strategy and narrative. And rarely did that narrative align with truth. Maya pressed closer against her mother, her small hands gripping tightly. Her chalk-stained fingers trembled. Mom, why are there so many? She whispered, her voice cracking under the weight of her fear. Angela crouched slightly, keeping her eyes locked on the officers. Because they don't understand yet, she murmured back. But I do. And I'm here. One of the newcomers broke away from the group and walked directly toward them. He was younger, but his posture was firm, rehearsed. Ma'am, he said, voice carrying enough for the neighbors to hear, you're interfering with a police investigation. If you continue, we may have to detain you. Angela's chest tightened. The word detain wasn't a threat she could take lightly. She straightened, her voice cutting through the murmurs around them. An investigation into what? Chalk drawings? A child playing outside her own home? Her words rippled through the crowd. Some neighbors exchanged uneasy, uncertain glances, but others nodded faintly, as if reassured that the police were handling things. The young officer didn't waver. He gestured toward Maya. We need to speak with her directly. Angela's voice dropped to a sharp edge. She's 12. You will not question her without me present. Tension crackled in the air. The officers stiffened, their authority being challenged in public. The taller officer from earlier took a step closer, voice hardening. Ma'am, step aside, now! Maya's breathing grew shallow, her chest rising and falling too fast. The noise of radios, the weight of stairs, the flash of lights, it all closed in on her like walls. Tears filled her eyes as she whispered, I didn't do anything. Angela's heart broke hearing it. She wanted to wrap her arms around her daughter, to take her inside and slam the door against all of it. But she knew moving the wrong way could set them off. One sudden motion, one raised voice, one misstep, and this could spiral. The younger officer's hand moved toward his cuffs, not yet unclipping them, but close enough to send a chilling message. Angela's training screamed inside her. She recognized every signal, the tightening formation, the stiffened jaws, the coded glances. They weren't here to listen. They were here to control. Her voice rose deliberate and unwavering so that every neighbor could hear. This is harassment. You are surrounding a child to play with chalk. You should be ashamed. The taller officer's eyes narrowed. His tone dropped, quieter but sharper than before. You need to calm down, ma'am. The words hit Angela like a spark to dry tinder. Calm down. She had heard them before, always used to silence, to shift blame, to erase the truth. She clenched her fists, forcing her voice to stay steady. I am calm, she replied, her tone cutting through the tension. But I will not step aside. Maya clung tighter, tears streaming now. Mom, please! The younger officer's hand hovered closer to his belt. The taller officer adjusted his stance, blocking their path back toward the house. The moment balanced on a knife's edge. The air grew heavy, the silence of neighbors pressing in. Every detail seemed magnified, the chalk dust on Maya's palms, the gleam of metal at the officer's side, the faint hum of another car approaching in the distance. Angela's mind raced. She knew what could happen next. She also knew she couldn't let it happen, and then another engine roared closer, not another patrol car. Something else. The scene was about to shift again. The engine grew louder, echoing down the narrow street. Every head turned. For a brief moment, the flashing lights reflected in Angela's eyes were replaced by the glare of new headlights. A dark SUV slowed to a stop just beyond the cluster of patrol cars. Its tinted windows obscured the driver, but the very sight of it made the officers stiffen. Angela caught it instantly, the way their bodies shifted, the way their conversation faltered mid-sentence. Whoever was inside carried weight, authority. The door creaked open and a figure stepped out. Not another officer in blue, but a man in a tailored suit, his badge gleaming from his belt. His presence was different, commanding without the bark of sirens. The crowd stirred, whispering. Angela felt a flicker of hope. Small, fragile. But there, the suited man walked toward them, his eyes scanning the scene. 4 armed officers towering over a mother and child. The smear of chalk still visible on the pavement, neighbors frozen in silence. His jaw tightened. What exactly is happening here? His voice cut through the air, even and controlled, but edged with steel. The taller officer snapped to attention. Sir, we received a call about vandalism. Graffiti on private property. We were conducting an investigation when... Vandalism? The man's gaze shifted downward, landing on the pink and yellow chalk shapes that still glowed faintly under the streetlights. This? No one spoke. The silence was louder than the sirens. Maya pressed herself against Angela, her eyes wide. She didn't know who this man was, but she could sense the change in energy. Angela's heart pounded. She kept her stance firm, but her mind raced with questions. Who is he? A captain? A chief? Someone who might actually listen, or just another authority here to silence me? The suited man stepped closer, lowering his voice so that only the officers and Angela could hear. You're surrounding a child. Do you understand how this looks? How will this play? The younger officer faltered. Sir, we were following protocol. She resisted questioning. She's 12. The man's words sliced like a blade. And her mother has every right to be here. I suggest you remember that before you escalate further. Angela caught her breath. Finally, someone sees it. But the taller officer wasn't ready to back down. His jaw clenched, his voice sharp. With all due respect, sir, we can't just walk away. If the neighbors report it, we have to address the issue. If we don't, it sends the wrong message. The suited man's eyes hardened. The wrong message, he repeated slowly, is what you're sending right now. 4 armed officers against a little girl with sidewalk chalk. The crowd, though still hushed, was listening. Phones appeared in hands, red lights blinking as cameras recorded. The officers saw it too, unease flickering across their faces. Angela whispered to Maya, her voice soft but steady. It's okay. Breathe. Just breathe. Maya nodded weakly, but her hands still shook. The younger officer's radio crackled, a voice demanding status. He glanced at his superior, uncertainty flashing across his face. For a moment, it seemed the tension might break, that reason might prevail, and then the taller officer snapped. His hand shot out, pointing directly at Angela. She's interfering. If we don't act now, we lose control of this scene. The words hit like a thunderclap. The younger officer froze. The crowd gasped. Maya whimpered, clinging tighter. Angela felt the ground tilt beneath her. Lose control. That was the phrase she had dreaded, the one that always justified force. The suited man stepped forward, his voice rising now, sharp with warning. Don't even think about it. But the taller officer had already shifted his stance, his hand hovering too close to his weapon. The air grew electric. Every breath, every movement carried the weight of what might happen next. Angela's pulse roared in her ears. She knew this was the edge, the moment where one wrong decision could shatter everything. Maya whispered through her tears, so soft only Angela could hear. Mom, I'm scared. Angela tightened her hold. I know, baby. I know. The world seemed to hold its breath. The suited man moved between them, his body a barrier, his voice thundering now. Stand down! The taller officer hesitated, his muscles taut, as his pride and anger collided with the command. The younger officers wavered, their eyes darting between authority and instinct. For one endless second, the entire street balanced on a razor's edge, between justice and tragedy, between restraint and chaos, and then a sound split the night, not gunfire. Not shouting, but the piercing wail of another siren, closer, louder, bearing down on them. The moment wasn't over. It was only deepening. The new siren sliced through the night like a blade, drowning out the murmurs of the crowd. Red and blue light washed over the street once more as a second patrol car screeched to a halt. The smell of burnt rubber hung in the air. The suited man didn't flinch. His shoulders squared, his gaze locked on the taller officer as if daring him to make a move. But Angela felt her chest tighten. She knew how quickly reinforcements could turn a fragile standoff into chaos. Two more officers stepped out of the car, younger, leaner, their hands instinctively brushing against the holsters on their hips. Their eyes scanned the scene. Angela clutching Maya, neighbors holding phones, the cluster of patrol cars, and then landed on the suited man. Confusion flickered across their faces. What's going on here? One of them asked, his voice sharp, uncertain. The taller officer wasted no time. Vandalism suspect. Mother is interfering with the investigation. Crowd gathering. Situation unstable. The words were rehearsed, clinical, scrubbed clean of the truth. And for a moment, Angela saw the new officer's body stiffen, ready to fall into formation. The suited man's voice thundered before they could move. Stand down. There is no crime here. His tone carried the weight of authority, but the tension was already climbing. The crowd buzzed louder, the phones now aimed openly at them. Every neighbor seemed to sense what Angela did, that this moment could snap in either direction. Angela pulled Maya closer, whispering, Don't look at them, baby. Just keep your eyes on me. But Maya's trembling gaze drifted anyway, to the flash of weapons, to the anger on faces meant to protect, to the fear reflected in her neighbor's eyes. The younger of the new officers hesitated, his voice low. Sir, if this gets out of hand, if... The suited man's eyes narrowed. It already has. Because you've turned a child's sidewalk chalk into a battlefield. The crowd stirred, a ripple of agreement moving through them. Someone shouted, She's just a kid. Another voice called out, Leave them alone! Phones raised higher. Record buttons pressed. The taller officer's jaw twitched. He hated this. The cameras, the criticism, the loss of control. His voice cracked like a whip. Everyone, back up. This is a police matter. But no one moved. Angela's pulse hammered in her throat. She could feel Maya's small fingers digging into her side, trembling with fear. She wanted to scream, to run, but she forced herself still. If I move, they'll twist it. If I argue, they'll use it against me. All I can do is hold on. The suited man stepped closer to the taller officer, lowering his voice so only a few could hear. You're out of line. One more step and you'll regret it, the officer bristled, his hand flexing dangerously near his weapon. Again. The sound of Maya's sob broke through the noise, high-pitched, cracking, the kind of sound that tears through even the hardest. Heart. Angela's eyes burned. She whispered fiercely into her daughter's hair, I've got you. Nothing's going to happen to you. Not while I'm here. But deep down, she wasn't sure. The younger officer from the second car shifted uneasily, his voice low but trembling. "Sir, people are filming." "We can't!" the taller officer snapped back. "I don't care who's filming!" "Control comes first," the words landed heavily. A chilling reminder that authority here wasn't about truth or justice. It was about dominance. Angela's knees shook, but she steadied herself, planting her body between Maya and the cluster of men with weapons. "If they want her, they go through me," the suited man's voice cut through again, louder this time, so that everyone could hear. "You will not lay a hand on this child." "Not tonight. Not ever." The street froze. Even the air seemed to stop moving. The taller officer glared, his pride teetering on the edge of fury. His next move would decide everything, and then, from the back of the newest patrol car, a voice called out, firm, commanding, unfamiliar, "Enough!" The crowd gasped. A figure was stepping into the light, someone no one expected. The single word, "enough," rolled across the street with the weight of command. Every head turned toward the newest patrol car. The door opened slowly, deliberately, as though whoever sat inside knew that all eyes were waiting. A tall woman stepped into the glow of the streetlights. Her presence was steady, unmistakable, her uniform crisp, her stride purposeful. She wasn't a rookie. She wasn't just another faceless officer in the crowd. She was someone who carried rank. Angela felt her breath catch. The badge gleamed against the dark fabric of the woman's chest. Her hair was tied back, her posture straight as steel. She moved with the calm precision of someone used to control. Not the control of intimidation, but the control of respect. The crowd murmured. The suited man gave the faintest nod, almost in recognition, but the taller officer stiffened, his jaw tightening as the woman approached. He hadn't expected her. He hadn't wanted her. The woman's gaze swept the scene. The cluster of officers, the blinking phones, the frightened child clutching her mother's side, the chalk drawings fading into the pavement. Her eyes narrowed and her voice rang clear. "What is this?" The taller officer cleared his throat, masking unease with bluster. "Suspect, possible vandalism." Mother interfering, situation escalating, her head tilted slightly. "Escalating because of you." The words cut like glass. Angela held Maya tighter, whispering, "It's okay, baby. Just stay with me." But inside her chest was a storm. She didn't know who this woman was. She dared not hope. Not yet. The suited man took a step back, letting the newcomer take the lead. His silence was telling. Whoever she was, she had authority even over him. The taller officer tried again, his voice straining. "Ma'am, with all due respect." "Respect?" Her eyes flashed. "You surround a 12-year-old with weapons drawn and call it protocol. That is not respect. That is abuse of power!" A ripple ran through the crowd. People whispered, cameras lifted higher. Angela's pulse thudded in her ears. She sees it. She actually sees it. The taller officer's face burned crimson. "We can't just let this go. If we back down now, you'll do your jobs correctly," the woman snapped. "Or I'll make sure you don't do them at all." The air thickened. Angela could see the younger officers waver, caught between loyalty to their superior and obedience to this new authority. Maya's voice was small, trembling. "Mom, who is she?" Angela didn't answer because she didn't know. Not yet. The woman stepped closer to Angela and Maya, her tone softening just slightly. "Are you hurt?" Angela shook her head, too choked with emotion to answer correctly. Maya clung to her, eyes wide, but for the first time that night, there was the faintest flicker of safety in her gaze. The woman turned back to the officers, her command ringing through the street. "Stand down, now!" The taller officer's fists clenched. His pride, his authority, his control, all slipping in front of the cameras, the crowd, his peers. He stepped forward, his voice low, venomous. "You're making a mistake." The woman's eyes locked on his. "No, you did." The silence that followed was suffocating. Every neighbor held their breath. The suited man remained still, watchful. Angela's heart pounded as realization dawned. This woman wasn't just another officer. The way she spoke, the way the others faltered, it was clear. She was higher. "Much higher," Maya whispered again, her voice trembling with awe and disbelief. Mom, I think she's in charge. Angela finally let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Yes, she thought. She is, but relief didn't come. Not yet. Because the taller officer's glare hadn't softened, his pride wasn't broken. It was wounded. And wounded pride is dangerous. He took one last step forward, his voice cracking like a whip. If we stand down now, we lose all control. The woman's reply was ice cold. Control is not worth a child's fear. And just as the street seemed to tip toward resolution, the radio on the taller officer's shoulder crackled. A voice barked through, urgent, demanding, "Status report! Do you require backup?" The taller officer's lips curled into a bitter smile. His thumb hovered over the button. One call, one word, and the street could be flooded with more armed men in minutes. Angela's stomach dropped. "Please don't let this spiral out of control again." The woman stepped forward, her voice sharp as thunder. "Don't you dare!" The officer's thumb trembled. His pride and rage battled against the weight of her authority, and in that suspended second, the world braced itself for resolution. Or for chaos. The taller officer's thumb hovered over the radio button. Every muscle in his hand twitched with stubborn defiance. He wasn't just holding a device, he was holding the power to flood the street with more armed men, to twist this tense standoff into chaos. Angela's chest tightened. Her arms wrapped around Maya as if her embrace could shield her daughter from what might come. She could feel Maya's heart pounding against her own. Frantic, terrified, the woman in command stepped forward, her voice like a blade. "Do not call it." Her words sliced the silence. But the officer's pride burned hotter than reason. His voice was low, seething, and audible enough for everyone to hear. "You don't get it. If we lose control here, we lose it everywhere." His thumb pressed halfway down. The radio crackled, alive with static. Angela felt her knees weaken. "Please, don't let this happen." The crowd surged with panic. Someone shouted, "Don't you dare!" Others pleaded, voices trembling with desperation. Phones zoomed closer, catching every second. Then, Maya's small voice pierced the air. "Please, stop!" It was barely louder than a whisper, but the street went silent. Every officer, every neighbor, every camera caught it. The taller officer froze, his thumb suspended over the button. His eyes flicked down, not at Angela, not at the commanding woman, but at Maya. The chalk was still faintly smeared on her hands. The trembling lips, the wet streaks of tears across her cheeks. For a second, something human flickered in his gaze. Doubt, hesitation, but it wasn't enough. He sneered, his voice like venom. "This doesn't change anything." His thumb pressed. Static roared. A dispatcher's voice crackled. "Unit 5, status. Do you require backup?" Angela's stomach plummeted. The call had gone through. The nightmare was multiplying. Before the taller officer could answer, the commanding woman's voice thundered across the frequency. She snatched her own radio from her belt, her tone like iron. "This is Chief Daniels. Cancel all backup. I repeat, cancel all backup." The words detonated like a bomb. Gasps ripped through the crowd. Cameras jolted. Neighbors shouted in disbelief. Angela's own mind reeled. "Chief? Did she say chief?" The taller officer's face drained of color. His grip slackened around the radio. He stammered, his voice cracking under the weight of exposure. "Chief? You can't, this isn't—" But it was too late. The truth was out. Maya's mother wasn't just a woman fighting to protect her daughter. She was a woman fighting for her daughter's future. She was the highest-ranking officer on that street. And every order, every threat, every weapon raised against her child had just been flipped into a devastating truth. They weren't challenging a mother. They were challenging their chief. The crowd erupted. Cheers, shouts, disbelief. Phones captured every second. Angela, Chief Daniels, straightened to her full height, her voice reverberating through the street. "You aimed weapons at a child, my child, and you call it control. You call it justice. But what the world sees tonight is your abuse, your prejudice, your failure." Her words hit like thunderclaps. The taller officer stumbled, his pride shredded. His voice faltered as he tried to regain ground. "Chief, I I didn't know. That's the point, she roared. You didn't know because you didn't care to look. All you saw was the color of her skin. All you needed was one call, one assumption, and suddenly she was a suspect. A 12-year-old girl with chalk. Maya pressed her face into Angela's side. But for the first time, she felt something shift in her mother's voice. Not just anger, not just fear, but power. The crowd cheered louder. Neighbors shouted their support. Some even cried. The story was no longer hidden. It was spilling into every phone, every lens, every eye. The taller officer shook his head, sweat beading across his forehead. This isn't fair. You're twisting it. Angela stepped forward, fire in her voice. Fair? Fair would be my daughter playing outside without fear of armed men surrounding her. Fair would be treating her innocence with the same grace you give others. Tonight, the only thing twisted is the excuse you call protocol. The officer stumbled back, his authority crumbling under the weight of her words. His fellow officers lowered their eyes, shame flooding their faces. The suited man, who had stood silently, watching, finally spoke. His voice was calm, but it carried a finality that ended arguments. Chief Daniels has spoken. Stand down, now! The younger officers obeyed immediately, stepping back, lowering their weapons. The taller officer resisted, his fists trembling, his pride unraveling. But with the cameras recording, with the crowd watching, with his chief's glare locked onto him, he had no ground left. His hand slipped from his radio. Slowly, stiffly, he stepped back. Angela exhaled for the first time in what felt like hours. Her arms loosened around Maya, but only slightly. She kissed the top of her daughter's head, whispering, "You're safe, baby. You're safe." But inside, she knew it wasn't over, because safety wasn't measured in one night or one street or one confrontation. Safety was a promise this country still hadn't kept. And as her neighbors' cheers rang out, as phones continued to record, Angela's heart burned with a mix of fury and resolve. This wasn't just her fight. It was every mother's, every child's, every family that had lived through the same fear. Angela turned back to the officers, her voice carrying one last warning. You will answer for this. Every second of tonight is on record. Every decision you make will be seen. And I promise you, the world will not forget. The street erupted with cheers. The officers lowered their heads. The taller one turned away, his pride shattered, his authority broken. Angela looked down at Maya, who was still trembling, but now staring up at her with wide, tearful eyes. Mom, Maya whispered, you're the chief. Angela's lips trembled into a faint, bittersweet smile. Yes, baby. And tonight, the world needed to know. The crowd chanted her name now. Phones broadcast live. For once, the spotlight wasn't on a tragedy. It was on resistance, on truth, on justice, clawing its way into the light. But Angela knew better than to mistake a single moment for victory. This was a battle in a war that stretched far beyond her street, her city, her badge. Still, tonight mattered. Tonight, her daughter saw her mother stand unbroken. Tonight, her neighbors saw prejudice exposed. Tonight, the world would know the cost of suspicion and the strength of a mother's fight. The night ended not with silence, but with a question burning in every heart that had witnessed it. The street eventually grew quiet, but the silence was heavier than the noise that came before. He walked away that night, his body intact, but his spirit scarred. Every step toward home felt like it carried the weight of centuries. The humiliation, the fear, the anger, they weren't just emotions anymore. They were etched into him, like invisible wounds that no one could see, but that he would never stop feeling. And when he closed the door behind him, standing alone in the dim light of his living room, he realized something that shook him to his core. He had survived, but survival shouldn't have been the standard. He replayed every second in his head, the shouts, the accusations, the eyes of strangers staring, recording, whispering. He hadn't done anything wrong. He was existing, breathing, living in his own skin. Yet in that moment, his very existence had been treated as a crime. For hours, he sat there in silence, trying to calm his racing thoughts. But the truth pressed in from all sides. This wasn't just about him. What happened on that street had happened before, to countless others. Some hadn't made it home. Some had become headlines. Some had become hashtags. The difference between his story and theirs? Luck, pure, fragile luck, and that realization burned. Because no human life, no dignity, no freedom, should ever depend on chance. Days later, the impact still lingered. Friends asked why he seemed quiet or withdrawn. Family told him to stay safe, though no one could ever explain what that truly meant. Stay safe from what? From living? From walking down the street? From being himself? Every time he looked in the mirror, he saw not just his own reflection, but a reflection of every person who had been made to feel small, unwelcome, or dangerous because of the color of their skin. He carried their stories now, whether he wanted to or not. And the most challenging part? The world around him kept moving as if nothing had happened, the same sidewalks filled with laughter and chatter. The same city lights glowed at night. But for him, those lights no longer felt warm. They felt like spotlights, exposing him to a world that would never see him as innocent until proven guilty, but guilty until proven nothing. But there's something powerful about moments like these. They don't just break you, they awaken you. He started to speak out. Quietly at first, then louder. He told his story, not because he wanted pity, but because he wished to tell the truth. Because silence only protected those who thrived in it. Because for every person who thought this was just an incident, millions were living it every day. His story became part of something bigger. A movement, a reminder, a refusal to stay invisible. And that's when he realized, while the night on that street may have shaken him, it also lit a fire he couldn't ignore. So, what does this mean for him, for us, for everyone watching? It means the story you just heard is not an isolated incident. It's not rare. It's not a mistake or a misunderstanding. It's part of a pattern, a system, a cycle that has repeated for generations. It means that racism doesn't always wear a mask or shout slurs. Sometimes it comes in the form of a stare that lingers too long. A question was asked with suspicion. A hand that hovers over a weapon before there's any reason. It means that behind every statistic, every headline, every viral video, there's a human being. A son, a daughter, a neighbor, a friend, living a story like his, and it means we can no longer look away. He made it home that night. But how many others didn't? He lived to tell his story. But how many stories ended before they began? And if survival is what counts as a happy ending, then what does that say about the world we've built? This is bigger than one man, bigger than one night. This is about all of us. The truth is we can't change the past. But we can change what happens next. We can choose to listen. We can choose to act. We can decide to make sure that survival isn't the best we can hope for. That dignity, justice, and equality are the baseline, not the dream. So, ask yourself, when the next story like this unfolds, and it will, where will you stand? Silent on the sidelines, or shoulder to shoulder with those demanding something better? Because the question isn't just whether he survived that night. The real question is, will we survive as a society if we continue to allow nights like that to happen? This isn't just his story, it's our story, and the ending hasn't been written yet. Because in the end, the fight against racism isn't about one man's survival, it's about all of ours. The only question is, what will you do with this story now?